Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making another recipe from the Arizona cookbook, celebrating Arizona April. And the recipe today is going to be date pudding, which I was a bit concerned and intrigued by this recipe in different ways. Like last week, it was also kind of an intriguing recipe. I was like, how's this gonna turn out? But that was more of just like I had like lack of seasoning. I wasn't really concerned with the integrity of the recipe. But this one, I'm genuinely concerned with how it will turn out. I feel like it might become a brick. I was so concerned that I actually made a date pudding recipe from the internet that I just kind of Googled and found yesterday. And here's a picture of it, which might look similar to the thumbnail, depending on how this recipe turns out, because I'm not gonna put a bad picture at the thumbnail, because that's just bad advertisement. So I will include the recipe in the description for that, which leads me to also point out that I need to type up this recipe, put that in the description as well. I didn't do that for the recipe last week. Or if you want, you can message me on Instagram and I'll just send you a picture. Same goes for last week. If you want that recipe, hit me up, I'll send it to you, and then you should be good to go. However, I will include the quantities in the ingredients list, and this recipe is so simple that you should really be good to go from there. But if you need it in written form, description or Instagram. But I mean, you'll see it in a second. There is no liquid in this recipe beyond an egg, versus the recipe that I made yesterday had a cup of water that you soak the dates in, which also just kind of loosens them up a little bit and makes them more malleable and kind of integrates with the baking a little bit more. This one, nope, just put them in there. So it's super vague. I'm going to make a few of my own kind of creative decisions along the way. Hopefully it works out well. Worst case scenario, I have the recipe that I made from yesterday, which was delicious. Let me just say, so good. We'll be making that again. Probably should have just made that the video, but we're sticking to the theme, and I'm also just very curious. I need to document how this turns out to show the world, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we run through the ingredients, and then you'll really see when we start running through the actual steps. Half a cup of sugar, 1 egg, 1 cup dates, half a cup of walnuts, 1/4 cup flour, half a teaspoon salt, and half a teaspoon baking powder. Before we get into the steps, I'm just gonna kind of give you the recipe that it kind of gave to me to show you how vague it is, because I will right out the gate be making a creative decision. The recipe, pretty much verbatim, because I've memorized it already after reading it 4 times, is beat together the sugar and eggs and then mix in all the other ingredients and then bake at 350 for 30 minutes in a shallow greased dish. That's it. So, right out the gate, I'm going to assume that we want to chop the dates and the walnuts, because they shouldn't be whole in a recipe, I would assume. So I'm going to chop those up, and then we'll proceed with cooking, hopefully not having messed up right out the gate. The next step is going to be to mix together the eggs and the sugar, just in a bowl with a whisk. You're good to go. Now that we have the dates and the walnuts chopped and we have the eggs and sugar beaten together, add those into the bowl along with all the other ingredients, mix it up, and then you're pretty much done, surprisingly. I'm still a bit skeptical of how this is gonna turn out, but we'll find out. Now, another situation where I had to make a creative decision. It just says in a greased shallow dish. So I'm picking a random dish, which happens to be a circular cake tin, because it's kind of like the smallest one I have that is shallow. I was thinking about doing like a loaf pan, but that's not shallow, so this is my best assumption at what to use for like the volume size of like what we have, because there's not a lot in there. But hopefully this is the correct move. We'll find out. So we'll put it in there and then put it in the oven at 350 for 30 minutes and see what comes out the other end. Let's hope it's edible. Honestly, kind of surprised. This turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to. It kind of looks like the date pudding that I made yesterday, except for the ones I made yesterday are like cupcake sizes, and this is obviously a whole dish. So I'm going to actually cut off a little piece of this so I can just try the date pudding on its own, but I will prep the rest of it like the recipe from yesterday, which is to poke holes in it and then drizzle a butterscotch sauce from that recipe as well on top, so it kind of soaks in a little bit. And then I'll plate it up with some whipped cream, some more of the sauce, and then we will compare it to what I had yesterday, and hopefully it's just good. It smells good. I'm really surprised. I did not expect really anything. I thought it was just gonna be burnt crisp, because 30 minutes, kind of a long time for the little amount of liquid that was in there. So let's give this a go. All right, here we have it. So obviously unmodified date pudding and then butterscotch and whipped cream date pudding. Visually looks pretty solid, so I probably did use it. Like the comment I mentioned at the beginning of the video, probably did use this picture, not the date pudding that I made yesterday. So that's a positive. Visually looks good, but more importantly, how does it taste? So we're going to try the straight up plain, get a sense of what it's like, because this butterscotch sauce, out of the park. So that being on top of almost anything probably is gonna make it delicious. That's why I kind of had to do a control. Didn't want to skew the data, but let's hope that I don't fling anything around. It is very chunky, so that is a little concerning. It's not quite as smooth and soft as what I made yesterday, but hopefully it tastes good. So it definitely is different from what I had yesterday. It's obviously not as tall, so there's a little less, I guess like body to it, is what I'm thinking. But what I had yesterday was a bit more like a cake versus what this is I don't really know what to compare. Like my brain jumped to like a cobbler where you have some kind of like cakey stuff in there, but it's not like all cake. It's more of like something else than like little cake kind of holding it together. But that's not really a cobbler. But hopefully you know what I'm saying. Because this is definitely, you can tell that it's dates and walnuts kind of with something else mixed around it. Versus what I had yesterday, the dates kind of became more of just a sweetener in it. And that flavor wasn't very forward in like, oh, hey, this is dates. Like you probably could tell, but this is definitely like, the first thing you're tasting is dates, followed by walnuts, and then kind of the cakey substance. Versus yesterday was a little bit more, everything kind of worked together equally. Now let's try it with the butterscotch and whipped cream and see how that does. You can't go wrong with butterscotch and whipped cream. That's all I'm saying. It's definitely better, just in the sense that you kind of, it helps meld the flavors a little bit, kind of having that creamy whipped cream and the butterscotch on there. Neither one is bad. They're both, I would say, good. It with the toppings is better. I feel like what I made yesterday is still above this, but honestly, from what is on that piece of paper of ingredients, to how I felt going into this, this is a miracle. I was not expecting anything good, let alone edible. So this is quite a shock. It's a happy shock, but quite a shock. So overall, I'd call it a success. The only factor that I'm still kind of curious and we'll have to do a test for is, does it reheat well? Because the recipe that I made yesterday reheats amazingly. I had one after lunch today and it was pretty much just like new. It's like it came out of the oven, just threw in the microwave for a few seconds, kind of brought it back up to temp. Amazing. So if this reheats, then it kind of will keep it neck and neck, versus if it doesn't, then it's a very clear winner. But overall, I mean, I'm very surprised and happy with how this turned out. And so on that note, bye Mom, still not dead. See ya.